My grandmother knew a lot about the needs in her local community. That was a small town in Pennsylvania, but she sure didn't know much about the rest of the world. And so she would know, for example, that the guy 3 houses down from her had lost his job and needed some assistance. She didn't know anything about a tsunami that had happened halfway around the world. You and I, on the other hand, we live in an age of media and technology, which allows us to know all about all sorts of needs. So we know about needs in the immediate area. We certainly know needs in the state, in the nation, in the world. We are inundated with this sense of need in the world. And the sheer volume of it, I think for many of us, is just paralyzing. What is there to do? I bring this up because I think this is exactly what happened to Andrew in this gospel story. I mean, if you recall the story, Jesus, this large crowd has come to Jesus. He wants to feed them. Andrew finds this boy who's got 5 loaves and 2 fish. But he says to Jesus, look, 5 loaves, 2 fish, but what good are these for so many? And I have to wonder what Andrew would have done if Jesus had not been there. If he had had 5 loaves and 2 fishes and 5,000 people, what would he have done? I don't think he would have done anything. He would have done nothing. And I say that not to be critical, but I say that because I think that's what I would have done. Perhaps you would have too. Because look, what are your alternatives? You could, I suppose, take tiny little fragments of bread and fish and give it a little bit to everyone. That would be fair, but that would be useless. The alternative is to feed a small group of people with what you have, and that would offend our sense of fairness. And since neither of those options are any good at all, I think we do nothing. We're just stuck. And I think that's kind of what happens to many of us in the world, in our own situations. We are just overcome by all of this need. A good place to see that is with perhaps a good way that we've experienced it, I should say, is with beggars, homeless beggars on the street. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of debate about what's the best thing to do in that situation. That's not my point. I just want to talk about what you and I perhaps are feeling at that point. Because I want to help. I'm sure most of you, I hope all of you, want to help. But there is that sense that, the person standing there represents a great deal of need, and we know we cannot meet that need. Certainly not with a little bit of change and the few moments of time that we have to interact. We just know it's not going to work, and so we don't do anything. But what could we do? What is the possibility? What's an answer to this? Well, I think Andrew made a mistake in the gospel story, and I think that mistake may be helpful to us to learn from. Because I think Andrew forgot that Jesus was present. Andrew made a simple calculation. 5 loaves, 2 fish, 5,000 people. It's not going to work. But when you do that, even if it's understandable, as it was in Andrew's case, but when we do that, it disregards our belief in a loving and powerful God. In other words, Andrew could have thought, well, this may not work, but Jesus is here, maybe it will work. And I think that's what we need to do. Because the story reminds us that it did work. 5 loaves, 2 fish fed 5,000 people. Jesus fed everyone. And maybe that just can serve to remind us that God still can do and does miraculous things in our situations. So we may know for an absolute fact that our donation to this parish, our donation to the annual pastoral appeal, our donation of time and money, I should point out, to any other need that we see around us, we may know for an absolute fact that that is insufficient to meet whatever need is presented for us. But I think this story reminds us that we need to make the donation of time and talent and resources anyway, because we don't know what God is capable or willing to do. We don't know what he's going to do. It may be as simple as just God moving me to do something and God moving lots of other people to do the same thing, and the sheer volume of that adds up to meet the need. Maybe that is how it works out. But it also may be that God takes a gift, an offering that you and I give, and does something miraculous with that. I think one of the lessons here in this gospel is we must not forget that Jesus is present, and that it's not all up to us. We need to do what we are called to do. And I think that's perhaps the second thing to remember, this idea of reminding ourselves that Jesus is with us. And that is that we need to involve God in our decisions about where we give. I mean, I suspect you are like most of us, and you could, over the course of a month, count a large number of mailings, TV ads, all sorts of places where we are asked to contribute. I don't know that we're expected to give to all of that. I don't think that's the point. But I think we need to involve God in those decisions. In other words, rather than being on the spot and going like, oh, should I do this? I think we need to be intentional about it and ask God, what is it? What are you calling me to do? Where do you want me to put my time and energy and resources to help the needy? A way that this was once phrased for me, which I found very helpful, was a phrase, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Do for the one person what you wish you could do for everyone. So you might wish to give to all of those causes that confront you, but you can't. So do for one what you'd want to do for all of them. And the trick, I think, to that phrase is to make sure that God is a part of helping you and I choose which one that is. Where does God want us to put our time and generosity? I appreciate that giving, this idea of giving and helping, is a huge topic. You may not know this, but Jesus talks about that and that topic of giving and possessions more than he talks about prayer. It's important. And this story just helps us scratch the surface a little bit. So I don't know where you are today. I just hope perhaps it allows you to take a step. So if by chance this idea of being paralyzed by the volume of need, if that describes you and you don't do anything, maybe the story will help you to remember that you shouldn't be. Maybe it is time to take a step to ask God, where do you want me to put some effort and some resources that he might use that miraculously. And for those of you that have, your sense of giving, you've worked that out over the years, you're feeling pretty good about it. What this story did for me was just reminded me that I needed to sort of keep questioning that. Am I doing as much as I could? Is God calling me to do something a little different? I think the lesson is to remember that Jesus is in the situations. We worship a powerful God. He can feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish.